Today, I am rating your FPL drafts with over 700 of you sending them in. We've got some very varied squads, including some early chips to be played in the likes of the bench booster and the wildcard. Some of you are considering going with someone like Gabriel, but actually not going with Haaland and Bruno Fernandes. There's a lot to talk about. I've rated every single one of them. Let's see what I think of your drafts. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well and you're enjoying pre-season. Now, one of the most anticipated videos during pre-season. You all want to get your drafts rated. I can't do every single one because we had over 700 submissions, but in today's video, I'm going to rate 9 different drafts that cover a whole range of different topics. Haaland, Bruno, Gabriel, Palmer, Bench Boost 1, Bench Boost 2, and lots of other things. So hopefully one of these is close enough to your squad to give you an idea of what I'd think if your squad was one of the ones that I had chosen. But if you do want to get an exact rating for your draft, every single one of these drafts will be given a rating by myself, but also the fantastic new Fantasy Football Scout Rate My Team tool will give you a very simple rating out of 100. So we'll also be comparing to see whether my team or my rating gets you a better score or a worse score than what Fantasy Football Scout will be giving you. If you want to get your team rated, there will be a link in the description. It is very simple. All you have to do is even just upload a screenshot of your current draft. If you want to have more rated, you can also just change things about, enter your team manually as well, depending on the players that you're changing every single day. But let's dive straight in and have a look at the first draft, which is a pretty contentious one. Now, one of the things that people are considering doing if they are playing an early bench boost, this squad is a bench boost 1 and then an early wildcard in game week 2 or 3. We are going to cover chip strategy this week and we are going to look specifically at the potential for an early bench boost in 1 or 2 and what it means for your squad and potential chip strategy going forward. But this squad has done too much in terms of shifting away from the premiums to focus on that early bench boost. My issue, particularly with a wildcard in game week 2, you've got the transfer window still open. Game week 3 even, the squads are not settled enough. So if you are going as part of that early bench boost, I think I would be wanting to delay it either until game week 4 or game week 6. I also think there is a huge risk going without both Haaland and Bruno. Going without both of them in game week 1 will either leave you in the top 10k or the bottom 10k, the top 10 million effectively in overall rank without going with either of them. For me, that's too much of a risk. And when you look at a certain group of players in this draft, I'm not sure the money is particularly that well spent. For example, you've got Cole Palmer. I'm still yet to see anything from him in preseason to massively make me feel like he is worth the money. Then you've got players like Mbeumo scored twice, but one was a penalty. Cunha, do you need both of them? You're trying to cover Bruno with both of them. You're taking up an extra spot. Phil Foden has been disappointing despite the minutes getting better. Florian Wirtz might be a good pick. There are too many uncertainties in this draft to go without both Bruno and Haaland, particularly for captaincy. There is no way in my mind that Palmer and then another one is a better captain in the opening few weeks than having one of Haaland or Bruno. You don't have to have both. I completely understand that having both in your team is pretty difficult, but I wouldn't want to go without both of them, particularly because I have not seen enough from the likes of Cole Palmer, Alexander Isak, Phil Foden, Matheus Cunha, Florian Wirtz. These are players who leave a lot to be desired still. So I don't mind the idea of an early bench boost in order to sacrifice one of Haaland or Bruno to strengthen your squad. I don't mind a lot of the players being picked there, but I think I would try and fit one of the two in, which is why I've given a 7.9. Fantasy Football Scout actually really like it because it predicts captaincy alternatives to do quite well. I'm a pretty boring, safe manager, so I like captaincy options in my team. That's why there's a little bit of difference in terms of the rating. Next up is a draft that I really like. First of all, a massive thank you to every single one of you who sent them in. Over 700 of you. So I really apologize that I can't get to all of them. But as I said, I've tried to pick lots of different drafts with different players in order to try and build up a collective so that hopefully this answers what I would think about your draft. But this is a team that I really liked. I actually gave this a 9.2 out of 10. It's a sort of 4-4-2 draft. Big at the back with still lots of reliable, sensible players going forward. Virgil van Dijk, Mark Gay, you've got a double after defense in Mosquera and Calafiori. You've got Enzo Lafay, Gibbs White, Bruno Fernandes, Szoboszlai, Igor Jesus, Erling Haaland. The only slight negatives to me about this draft are A, you don't have a fallen million defender, and I actually think there's a lot of good value in there. When you think to the likes of the Leeds defenders, even, Esteve and Burnley at times last year, the Sunderland defenders, I see no reason not to have a 4 million defender in your team, especially if they're not going to be starting every single week. I like a lot of the reliable penalty taking picks that are in this draft. If you simply downgraded Mitchell to a 4 million option, you know who I'm going to say, Thomas of Coventry would be my number one, and upgraded your 4.5 million midfielder to a 5 million option, potentially like Norgard, who's just signed for Everton, who might be a great option at that price, or someone else with good DEFCON appeal. I think we'd be bumping this up to a 9.2, 9.5 rating. I really like this squad. There are a couple of players. Is Mark Gay definitely going to be nailed now? Of course, it sounds like Gabriel is going to be a good pick, but generally, I like this team a lot. It's well balanced. It's got money in the defense, although if you're investing money in the defense, maybe you want a bit more DEFCON appeal. So the first draft that we looked at was a no Haaland, no Bruno draft, and I wanted one of them in there, which is effectively what this team has done. There is now Erling Haaland in and no Bruno Fernandes. So I have rated it higher. I've given it over an 8.5, actually an 8.7 out of 10. I do like this draft, especially if you are happy on captaining Erling Haaland for the first couple of games, because Bruno is quite expensive, and I think there is a bit of a question to be had about the price, particularly if you're not going to captain him. This draft is also built pretty well for a bench boost in game week 2. You've got the cheap Coventry defenders who've got Hull at home this week. You've got Tavernier who've got City away in game week 1 and a nice fixture in game week 2. So I really like what this draft has done compared to the first one, in able to fit in one of the two premiums for captaincy early on. My only real issue with it is when you compare it to a lot of the other drafts that do have Bruno and Haaland in, I don't think this looks any stronger, and it just doesn't have Bruno. Now, in order to do that, you're probably doing something like David Raya to Akinski in order to help afford Palmer all the way up to Bruno Fernandes, maybe downgrading Lamens, maybe doing Tavernier to Pascal Gross. To be honest, all of those are sacrifices that I would be willing to make in order to have Bruno Fernandes over Cole Palmer in your team. I'm not a huge fan of what I've seen from Palmer so far in preseason, and of course for the majority of last season. There might be times, there might be data managers out there that like Palmer at his price and what the fixtures early on can offer, but until I see more from that, I don't think the sacrifice of Bruno down to Palmer is worth it compared to what else you can do with your team. Then we're moving on and we're having a look at a back 5 DEFCON draft. This manager has gone fully in with DEFCON defenders. There's Ballard, Tarkowski, Harry Maguire, the new Leeds defender. You've got Canva, you've got Anderson, you've got Ampadu in there. You've got a really strong DEFCON core, a team that I think will perform really well over the course of the season. If you looked at this draft at the end of game week 38, I think you could pretty confidently say, yeah, this team did well over 38 game weeks, but we need to be able to have a little bit more flexibility to target a few specific players. So although I think that we as a collective are not talking about DEFCON enough, I think over the past few days, there has been a little bit more chat about some of the DEFCON defenders, some of the DEFCON midfielders, and whether they should be finding their way into our team. But a lot of people are looking at an early wildcard. So again, the shorter the window you're looking at, the worse the DEFCON appeal is. Whereas if you're looking over 10, 20 weeks, that's when a DEFCON defender or midfielder starts to become really important. So I don't mind the idea of having more DEFCON players in here. And I think that is a narrative and a thought process that a lot of us should start to consider when we're building our drafts. If you watch my latest draft video, which was out over the weekend, I've started to add in a few more bits of DEFCON, particularly into my defense. The 5 million defender pool, I think, is a really interesting place to potentially find one of those DEFCON defenders. But I think this has just done it too much, particularly with the two cheap forwards, only playing Erling Haaland up front every single week. There is a real lack of flexibility with this squad. If there's any forward like a João Pedro or one of the 6 million options that does well, if there's a more expensive defender, if you need to get to an Arsenal defender early on, this just does not have the flexibility to go and do that. So although I like the idea of having more DEFCON players in your team, this doesn't score very well for me. It's too inflexible. Now moving on to a draft that I really like, and it's probably no surprise that it's a draft I like, which is what we're seeing in the majority of teams that people are building. And not only do I like it, Fantasy Football Scout has also rated it a 91 out of 100 if you want to get your team rated. I know I couldn't do every single team that was submitted for this video. If you want to get yours rated, though, I will leave a link in the description to get yours rated on the Fantasy Football Scout website. But this is the Haaland Bruno, no Gabriel. It's actually a bench boost 2 draft. So again, it's got the likes of Van Uyk, Thomas, Rushworth, who's currently at Brighton but will be transferred over to Coventry as a 4.5 million goalkeeper. It's got a lot of the good players. Mosquera, keep an eye on Luke Shaw versus Lewis Hall. If Manchester United add him at left back, it could be an issue for Luke Shaw. Maybe not at the start of the season, but potentially long term. Ballard, Enzo Lafie, Brobby, also good for the opening few fixtures to help with that bench boost. I really like this squad, and it really is strong for the start of the season. I like what the bench boost looks like. I like what the squad looks like for the first few weeks. You're really targeting those opening fixtures. The slight issue with it, and again, it's not necessarily an issue, it's just something to consider if you are building a bench boost like this. It will likely force you into an early wildcard in either game week 3, but most likely game week 4 or game week 6. And we will cover that in tomorrow's video where we talk about the bench boost in a lot more detail, because once you get to game week 4, this team has a triple up on Manchester United, who play Manchester City that week. It's got a triple up on Sunderland, who start their difficult run of fixtures in game week 4. It's then got a lot of Coventry players who are not great to have on the bench in game week 4 to help rotate in. So I don't think it's a perfect structure if you want to carry the team long term. But a lot of people looking to play the bench boost early, if you're playing a bench boost 2 and you're happy to wildcard early, I think this is a great draft. Next up is a team from FPL Meerkat. Now, just a quick shout out. If you don't follow them on Twitter, please make sure you do. Every single week, they're producing a lot of very useful content on social media. But he has gone for a slight difference to the sort of traditional 3-4-3 template that a lot of people are building. And he's favored a 3-5-2. He's decided that those 6 million forwards are not particularly worth it. And if you actually downgrade one of them to a 5.5 million in Pascal Gross in midfield, an option that is going to become very, very popular, but is very under-owned at the moment. Set pieces, penalties for Brighton. We'll be talking a lot about Pascal Gross between now and the start of game week 1. I think if you start to invest that a little bit in the defense, put that 0.5 again into an extra slightly better DEFCON defender, I really like what this squad has built. You've got Bruno Fernandes, the Gibbs White spot. Maybe you could go for a Semenyo if you've got the money. Maybe you could go for a Matez Cunha or Brian Mbeumo. But if you like Gibbs White for the long term, I'm happy with that. You've got Dominic Szoboszlai. We'll talk about Florian Wirtz a little bit. You've got Iliman and Dye. Again, he might leave Everton, but you could easily change that for Enzo Lafie at the start of the season. Then you've got Pascal Gross, you've got Haaland, and you've got João Pedro. I really, really like this squad. I think it is structured well for the start of the season. You've got Lamens as your Manchester United coverage. You've got Williams, Gvardiol, Mosquera rotating with the cheap options with Ajer and Thomas. It doesn't plan on playing a chip early, which might get you left behind with the amount of people looking to play the bench boost in game week 1 or game week 2. But if you're not wanting to play a chip early, I think this squad is a really, really nice option that sets you up pretty well long term. And you can reevaluate the chips once the season has settled down a little bit. Now, moving on slightly to a draft that has tried to fit all 3 of the premiums in Erling Haaland, Bruno Fernandes, and Gabriel. There is a little bit uncertainty about which Arsenal defenders to go with. To be honest, I think there'll be enough clarity by game week 1 that one of David Raya, Ben White, Mosquera, maybe even Ezri Konsa at 4.5 million. Calafiori might be nailed to start with going over Gabriel. But this is what a draft could look like if you tried to fit them all in whilst also owning João Pedro. One of the obvious ways, if you want to go with all 3 of those, is to downgrade João Pedro to a 6 million forward. And that does allow a bit of money. But then my feedback for that draft would be, well, you don't have João Pedro, who I do think is a really good option to start the season. Fulham and Brighton, the opening 2. Then it is Arsenal, but then it is Hull at home in game week 4. So you don't have to worry about that. A fixture that the majority of people will be owning at least one Chelsea player for. So if you start without João Pedro, you're going to be scrambling or you're going to be playing a chip once that fixture does roll around. And to be honest, I quite like what this draft has been able to do. I don't think it's too weak. I think there are some good picks in there, and I think it's done a pretty good job in owning all of Gabriel, Bruno Fernandes, Erling Haaland, and João Pedro. It's got some good depth on the bench, Pascal Gross, Thomas, to rotate in with someone like Ajer and Milenkovic to allow you to try and afford some of those premiums in there. So if you're wanting to afford all of Gabriel, Bruno, Haaland, then I don't really have an issue with that. I think this is a pretty good attempt of doing that, but I do think it feels slightly too unbalanced. I think that's my real caveat to it. You are reliant on quite a lot of cheap players. You've got Ajer, you've got Enzo Lafie, you've got Pascal Gross, you've got Thomas, you've got Foden compared to going to an 8 million defender. Now, all of these in isolation are good picks. Do I have an issue with anyone having Ajer? No. Do I have an issue with anyone having Enzo Lafie or any of the others? I don't really have an issue with that. I just feel like it's maybe got one or two of them too many, and it's very simply fixed. I'm in the mindset that I don't want Gabriel to start the season at the moment. If it isn't clear which Arsenal defender was nailed at the start of the season, then I might have to find a way to own Gabriel. But whilst there are other cheaper defenders, that's what knocks this down a little bit. It is a very simple fix. I do think the squad is pretty nice. And if you do want to fit all three of Gabriel, Bruno, Haaland into your team, I think actually shifting to a back four with a Gross rotation, and actually Gross and Thomas rotate really well, is a very, very sensible way to do it. Next up is a squad that I'm sure you've seen maybe 50, 100 times over if you're looking on social media or on YouTube. It is probably the most template looking draft. It's the 3-4-3 formation with Haaland Bruno, another Arsenal defender. Again, a lot of the other squads that I've said, this is what I change, this is what I tweak, is kind of building towards this. We saw a very similar draft earlier on that also planned on playing the bench boost in game week 2. This is the same sort of draft, but a plan to save the bench boost a little bit further down the line. So it's less reliant on a second 4.5 goalkeeper. You can have more 4.0 defenders. You don't need to worry about a playing fifth midfielder. You can have someone like a Hughes in there, and you don't have to invest so much of the budget into the bench in order to free up the bench boost for game week 2 or game week 3. So I really like what this draft has done. Bruno is in. You've got Szoboszlai, Cunha, Foden. At the moment, it feels like a lot of these are probably just placeholders. Is Cunha the best 8 million? Is it going to be in Burmo? Is it going to be free up the money for Semenyo? Is it going to be Morgan Gibbs-White? Is it going to be Phil Foden? Is it going to be Rodgers, Dewsbury Hall, Harry Wilson, all in and around that price? The one thing that I actually think this draft is missing is a cheaper midfielder. Now, this draft has done a very good job with some cheaper defenders, Luke Shaw, Vuskovic, Xhaka, and Thomas, to free up money to upgrade your 6 million midfielder up to someone like a Foden or a Szoboszlai. So when you put it like that, I can't really mark it down as such, but I do think there is good value in someone like an Enzo Lafie or Pascal Gross. But Schade might be leaving, Iliman and Dye might be leaving, so the price point is slightly less important because it only really feels like Enzo Lafie, maybe Gross. If you go up a bit, there's Harry Wilson and Dewsbury Hall, but it feels less needed to cover that price point a little bit. So if you want to take a bit of money out of defense and you're still going for some of the DEFCON players, again, keep an eye on Luke Shaw about whether he's definitely going to start if Lewis Hall signs for Manchester United. I really like this squad, and actually the sort of premium midfield in Bruno, Foden, Szoboszlai, Cunha, I think is a real positive. And then I just had to talk about a draft that doesn't have Erling Haaland in it. And I personally am not a fan. When I look at this draft, I don't think it looks strong enough in order to counteract what you're doing if you don't have Erling Haaland in your team. Now, effectively, what this draft has tried to do is really spread the money from Haaland, play the bench boost early on in order to get that chip out of the way with a really strong bench in order to wildcard early as well. So this is a early bench boost, early wildcard combination if you are looking to sell Haaland. And to be honest, the majority of people looking to sell Erling Haaland are going down that strategy. However, as I've said, I don't think you want to wildcard in game week 2. Game week 3 is probably the earliest you want to do it in order to buy Erling Haaland into your team for Coventry at home. But then you're wildcarding to just buy Haaland because you've also started with double Manchester City and O'Reilly and Foden here. So you're not really maximizing that game week 3 wildcard to take advantage of Manchester City when you already own 2 of them in your team, and effectively all you're doing is wildcarding for Erling Haaland. Now, you could delay that until a game week 4 wildcard, which is the earliest I plan on playing the chip. Game week 6 potentially, or game week 4 are my current plans. But then you've got to find a way to get Erling Haaland into your team for game week 3 for Coventry at home. So it just leads to a little bit of inflexibility. I don't think Cole Palmer is massively worth the money. I think the team looks quite good, but apart from the week that you're playing the bench boost, you've left a lot of money on the bench. You're not filling your bench with enough good. There are some great cheap defenders, great cheap midfielders who can be fantastic for the bench boost, but also mean that going forward, you've got enough budget in your starting 11. This is almost impossible to get Erling Haaland into this team without a free hit or without a wild card in game week 3, which means you are committing one of those chips very early, which I don't particularly like. I don't love having so much strength in depth. I understand if this was a game week 1 wildcard, game week 1 bench boost, game week 2 wildcard, but again, that's too early for me to wildcard. So I can understand if you want to sell Haaland, a team like this can look appealing, but I would still want a little bit of a better squad structure and still players like a Thomas on the bench as part of the bench boost, a O'Shea or a Diop of Ipswich as part of the bench boost if you're going game week 1. There are lots of ways that you could do it. So I don't hate if you want to go Erling Haaland. I say that. I don't like the no Haaland drafts, but if you really want to do it, I think it is possible, but I don't think I'd be building a draft that looks like this. Anyway, that is all my ratings of 9 very different drafts, some scoring very well and some less so, but all of them have talking points. All of them are interesting, and I may have get some wrong and some might start the season well. And if you go Maverick and it starts the season well, congratulations, because you will absolutely be flying. If this still doesn't help you with what your draft should look like, what you should change, or what you should be doing, check the link in the top of the description if you want to get your draft rated on the Fantasy Football Scout website. Thank you all for watching. Drop a like if you've enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, and I'll be back again very soon.